Over a year ago, I made a video talking about one potential trade candidate from all 31 NHL teams, and the other day I went back and looked through that video, and a lot of those names are now on a new team, whether they did wind up getting traded or in some cases signed somewhere else in free agency. So today I wanted to do an updated version of that video. I'm excited to do this. These one from every team style videos are really what got the channel off its feet. I did a bunch last offseason, and I plan on doing a lot of them before this upcoming season starts as well. Before we go any further, be sure to go follow me on Instagram and Twitter to stay connected. You can also go check out my gaming channel. If any of those things interest you, links will be down below in the description. And of course, if you guys are new to this channel and you want to see more NHL content like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button. And now let's get into talking about one potential trade candidate from all 31 NHL teams. If this is the first one from every team video you've seen on this channel, we go in alphabetical order, so starting off with the Anaheim Ducks, and my pick for them is actually their captain, Ryan Getzlaf. Now, I think this kind of all comes down to how good of a team Anaheim is this upcoming season. I'd say they plan on being competitive or they wouldn't have signed someone like Kevin Shattenkirk, but let's just say Anaheim is completely out of the playoff race around the trade deadline. Given the fact that Getzlaf has just 1 year left on his contract, he is somebody that I could see getting shopped at the deadline as kind of a rental. He could be a really valuable asset for a contending team. One other thing is he does have a full no move clause, so he would be in complete control and pretty much be able to decide where he wants to be traded to. Next up, we have the Arizona Coyotes, and for them my pick is definitely defenseman Nick Hjalmarsson. He is the prototypical defensive defenseman, and I think if he was on the trade market there would be a lot of interest shown in him. He is set to become an unrestricted free agent next offseason. I would guess he probably won't re-sign in Arizona, so as opposed to the Coyotes losing him for nothing, I could definitely see them trading him away and trying to recoup some draft picks, considering they've lost so many for various different reasons. The Boston Bruins, my pick for them might be a little bit controversial. It's Jake DeBrusk, and I say it might be controversial given the fact that he's seen as kind of a big part of this team's future, given the fact that he's only 24, just had a bit of a down year when you compare it to the sophomore season that he had, but even in a down year, Jake DeBrusk is still a productive top 6 winger, so why do I say he's a potential trade candidate for the Boston Bruins? Well, their blue line has took a pretty big hit this offseason. On paper, it doesn't look the greatest, so my thought process is maybe they can trade one of their forwards that has some value to upgrade their blue line, and they're not going to trade Pastrnak, Bergeron, or Marchand, so maybe Jake DeBrusk is the guy. And I'm not saying I think the Boston Bruins will trade Jake DeBrusk. Remember, this is just one potential trade candidate from every team. Moving on now to the Buffalo Sabres, my pick for them is a pretty obvious one. It's Rasmus Ristolainen. He was also my pick for them in last year's video. This whole thing is pretty tiresome. It feels like Ristolainen's name has been in trade talks for years now, yet he's still a Buffalo Sabre, which I find kind of crazy. I feel like I don't really have to do any explaining as to why he's my pick for them. The Calgary Flames are a team that has already made a lot of moves in terms of signing free agents, so I don't really see them being too active on the trade front, but if I had to pick somebody, I guess I'll go with Derek Ryan. They signed depth players like Joachim Nordstrom and Dominic Simone, so I feel like Derek Ryan is definitely pretty expendable. Next up, we have the Carolina Hurricanes, and my pick for them is Jake Bean, their first round pick from the 2016 NHL draft. He's a defenseman who's put up really good numbers in each of the American Hockey League seasons he's played so far. Honestly, I think if he were on any other team in the league, he would already be a regular in the NHL. It's just Carolina has so many defensemen that can play. You got Dougie Hamilton, Jacob Slavin, Brady Shea, Jake Gardner, Brett Pesce, Hayden Fleury, and then they just signed Joachim Ryan, so that's 7 defensemen right there. It'll definitely be pretty tough for Jake Bean to break into that lineup. If Carolina wants to, say, improve their goaltending or maybe add another forward, Bean is somebody I could definitely see getting moved. Moving on now, we have the Chicago Blackhawks, a team who has been in the news pretty much ever since they openly came out and said that they are rebuilding. It sparked a lot of trade rumors involving players like Patrick Kane, Jonathan Toews, and Duncan Keith, who's actually my pick here. The reason I am going with Duncan Keith is just because I feel like he is the most likely to be traded out of himself, Kane, and Toews. Maybe Duncan Keith wants to go somewhere else and try and win another Stanley Cup for the final couple years of his career, because that probably isn't going to happen in Chicago, but on the other hand, Keith has already won 3 Stanley Cups, so maybe that isn't a priority to him. He has a no move clause, so if Duncan Keith doesn't want to leave Chicago, then he's not leaving Chicago. It all just comes down to what he wants at this point. The Colorado Avalanche, my pick for them is Ian Cole, who was actually my pick for them in last year's video, but I feel a lot more confident in saying that now, especially after they traded for Devin Toews and signed him to that 4-year contract extension, because you look at their D-core right now, you got Eric Johnson, Samuel Girard, Ian Cole, Devon Toews, Ryan Graves, and Cale Makar. That's a pretty stacked top 6. But then there's Bowen Byram, and if he comes to training camp and proves that he's just too good not to play in the NHL, then one of the guys I just mentioned is probably going to be on the outs, and if I had to guess, I would say Ian Cole is probably going to be the odd man out. Next up, we have the Columbus Blue Jackets. This was a pretty tough one. I decided to go with goaltender Elvis Merzlikins, who obviously just had an incredible rookie season. I'm sure a lot of people will disagree with this, but I think Jonas Korpisalo is going to be the #1 guy in net for the Blue Jackets moving forward, and while yes, it is a luxury to have 2 really good goaltenders that you can rely on, the thing is they both probably have pretty high trade value, and if Columbus views one of them as the backup moving forward, then I could see the other getting traded. I'm going with Merzlikins here, but it honestly could be Korpisalo. They're both on the TSN trade bait board, and I don't think that's for no reason. The Dallas Stars, my pick is definitely Julius Honka. It's another situation I'm kind of tired of talking about, similar to the Rasmus Ristolainen situation in Buffalo. Honka's name has seemingly been in trade talks forever now. It just hasn't worked out in Dallas. It's probably not going to work out. He's already demanded a trade. I don't know why he's still a member of the Dallas Stars. Even if Dallas doesn't get anything valuable in return for him, I think it'd be a classy move by the organization just to trade him somewhere else and give him a new opportunity. Next up, we have the Red Wings. Now, they don't really have too many valuable assets, and the ones that they do have are not going to get traded. They're going to be a part of the team moving forward. So in terms of a trade candidate, I guess I'll go with Luke Glendening. He's got 1 year left on his contract, and then he's going to be an unrestricted free agent. He's a 4th liner, a penalty killer, not really anything more than that. I do think there would be some interest in him, maybe a team looking to add some speed and grit on the 4th line, but I would be shocked if Detroit got anything more than like a 6th round pick in return. Moving on now, we have the Edmonton Oilers. For them, I'm going to go with Alex Chiasson. This is a guy who had a really good 2018-19 season, scored 22 goals, and then the 19-20 season wasn't really able to follow that up, scoring just 11 goals in 65 games. And with the emergence of a guy like Taylor Yamamoto on the right wing, and then signing Jesse Puljujarvi, who's probably going to play a top 9 role this upcoming season, I think that slides Chiasson a lot further down the depth chart and makes him expendable. Maybe if they want to trade him for like a top 6 defenseman or something. The Florida Panthers are another team that has already made a lot of moves. They signed numerous free agents. They acquired Marcus Nudavara via trade. I don't really see them being too active for the remainder of the offseason, but for a trade candidate, I guess I'll go with RFA defenseman Mackenzie Weegar. There was a lot of talk about him like 2 weeks ago. Apparently the Toronto Maple Leafs were really interested in him. Since then, things have really cooled down. We haven't heard his name as much, but just given the fact that there has been so much trade talk regarding him so far this offseason, I feel like he has to be the choice here for Florida. The Los Angeles Kings, I had a tough time making a choice for them. I don't think there'd be a lot of interest in Jonathan Quick at all. I don't think there'd be a ton of interest in Dustin Brown or Jeff Carter either, just because of the contracts that they are on. They're not going to trade Kopitar, they're not going to trade Doughty, so I decided to go with Alex Iafallo, who just had a career year for the LA Kings, 43 points in 70 games. He's set to become a UFA next offseason, which is the biggest reason why I actually decided to go with him. If the LA Kings get the sense that they're not going to be able to re-sign him, then I could definitely see them trading him somewhere and get at least a decent package in return, because he is only 26. For the Minnesota Wild, I'm definitely going to go with defenseman Matt Dumba. He's another guy whose name you always kind of hear in trade talks, but nothing ever really comes of it, and since Bill Guerin has become general manager of the Minnesota Wild, he has not been shy to make trades whatsoever, so I don't really think it's too far-fetched to believe that we could see Matt Dumba traded within the next year or so, and I'd imagine he has decent trade value. This is a guy who's put up 50 points in a season before. Moving on now to the Montreal Canadiens, my pick for them is Jonathan Drouin. He just hasn't become the player that Montreal expected him to be back when they traded away Mikhail Sergachev to bring him in, and you look at the Montreal Canadiens wingers right now, I don't even think Jonathan Drouin plays in the top 6. Over him, you have guys like Tyler Toffoli and Josh Anderson now, and then also Brendan Gallagher and Thomas Tatar, and at a $5 million cap hit for a team that doesn't really have a lot of cap space, is he somebody you want on your third line? Probably not, so for all of those reasons, I would say he's definitely a trade candidate for them. For the Nashville Predators, I was going back and forth between Ryan Ellis and Matthias Ekholm. I decided to go with Ekholm here just because I feel like the Predators are more likely to move him than Ellis, and I think Nashville would be able to get a really good return for Matthias Ekholm. He's an underrated defenseman. In my opinion, he's on one of the most team-friendly contracts in the NHL, 2 years left at a $3.75 million cap hit. The Nashville Predators are a team that has been in the market for a top 6 winger for a while now, and if they don't get one in free agency, then maybe they could go out and trade a a guy like Matthias Ekholm to get one. The New Jersey Devils, my pick for them is definitely Kyle Palmieri. I think if they're out of the playoff race around the deadline for this upcoming season, Kyle Palmieri could be one of the most sought after rentals on the market. This is a guy who's now put up 5 consecutive seasons of scoring 20 or more goals. I definitely think there'd be a ton of interest in him, and if Blake Coleman can get New Jersey a first round pick, I think Kyle Palmieri easily could. Next up we have the New York Islanders. Ideally, I'm sure the Islanders would like to trade either the Andrew Ladd or the Johnny Boychuk contract. I think that would be extremely difficult to do and is kind of unrealistic. I decided to go with Casey Cizikas just because I feel like he's a lot more of a realistic option in terms of somebody that they could move to free up a little bit more cap space and make it easier to re-sign Matthew Barzal and Ryan Pulock. Cizikas is a really good role player and he can score a little bit too. He scored 20 in the 18-19 season. I think there'd be a decent amount of teams out there interested in him. I'll be honest, I might be a little bit disappointed if they do trade him just because I love watching the line of Clutterbuck, Cizikas, and Martin go out there and crush everything in sight, but it might have to happen. Moving along now, next up we have the New York Rangers. For them, I'm going to go with Brett Howden. I think a lot of people expected him to really up his production this season from the 23 points he put up in 66 games as a rookie in 2018-19. That didn't exactly happen, and I look towards next offseason, which is going to be a big one for the Rangers. They have a lot of RFAs: Pavel Buchnevich, Philip Hedl, Brett Howden, Julian Gauthier, and then Igor Shesterkin, who's the big one. So with all those guys I just mentioned being RFAs next offseason, I don't really know how big of a priority Brett Howden is going to be for the Rangers and if they view him as like a big part of the team moving forward. So for that reason, I think he's a potential trade candidate for them. The Ottawa Senators are a tough one because they've already traded away so many of their veterans: Matt Duchene, Hoffman, Stone, Jean-Gabriel Pageau. All of those guys are already gone. So many of the guys on the Senators roster right now are young players that are building blocks for them, with the exception of a couple. I'm going to go with Artem Anisimov here, I guess. He's a veteran player who can give you 20 goals. Maybe there'd be some interest in him. Over the past couple of trade deadlines, Ottawa has been so active and have been big time sellers. I don't really expect them to be that this year just because they don't really have a ton to sell anymore. Next up, we have the Philadelphia Flyers. For them, I'm definitely going to go with James Van Riemsdyk, who is still a pretty productive player, but will most likely be kind of difficult to trade just because of the contract that he's on. 3 years left at a $7 million cap hit. Philly isn't in an awful cap situation. They have $4.81 million in cap space, but they do have to re-sign Philippe Myers. It's next offseason where things are going to get interesting, where Travis Sanheim is an RFA, and then Carter Hart, who's going to cost a lot. They definitely would benefit from freeing up JVR's $7 million cap hit, and if they can find a suitor for him, I definitely think they pull the trigger. The Penguins are another pretty difficult one because they already have made a lot of trades, acquiring Kasperi Kapanen, Mike Matheson, and of course trading Matt Murray to Ottawa. I don't really see Jim Rutherford being too active on the trade front over the next year or so. Since I have to go with somebody, I guess I'll pick Colton Sevier, who's a piece they got in the Mike Matheson trade. He's a UFA next offseason, so I mean, maybe they trade him, maybe they don't. I was gonna go bold for the Penguins and put somebody like Malkin or Letang, but I really just don't see it happening. For the San Jose Sharks, I guess I'll go with Patrick Marleau. I mean, we saw them do this last year. They signed him for the 1920 season, traded him to the Penguins at the deadline because they were kind of out of the playoff race, although I don't really see them being as bad as they were this past season. With that being said though, I don't have a lot of faith in their current goaltending situation, so I don't really know how good San Jose is going to be, and maybe we see them do the same thing with Marleau this season as they did last season. Moving along now to the St. Louis Blues, my pick for them is Jaden Schwartz. The reason being is he is set to become a UFA next offseason. We just saw them lose their captain Alex Pietrangelo for nothing to free agency, so I don't really think the St. Louis Blues want to go through that again with one of their better wingers losing Jaden Schwartz for nothing. I'd imagine they'll probably try to get a contract extension done throughout the season, but if they get the sense that he doesn't want to re-sign or wants to test free agency, he's somebody I definitely could see getting moved. The Tampa Bay Lightning, it's the worst kept secret in the NHL that they have to unload some cap space if they want to re-sign RFAs like Anthony Cirelli and Mikhail Sergachev. In order to do that, they're probably going to have to trade one of Andre Palat, Tyler Johnson, or Alex Killorn. The problem with Johnson and Palat is they both have full no trades, so for that reason I'm going to go with Alex Killorn here as their biggest trade candidate just because I feel like he'll be the easiest player to move. Now Killorn does have a modified no trade clause that kicked in recently. I think it was July 1st he submitted submitted a 16-team no-trade list, so 16 teams that he doesn't want to go to, but that still leaves 15 teams for Tampa Bay to work with. And Killorn is coming off of a career year. He has a reasonable cap hit of $4.45 million. I could definitely see a lot of teams being interested in him. Moving along now, we have the Toronto Maple Leafs. For them, I'm going to go with Travis Dermott. The Maple Leafs have a lot of bodies on defense, especially if Rasmus Sandin and Timothy Liljegren are ready to play in the NHL. That makes it a lot more complicated. Over the next year or so, I do think we see the Maple Leafs move out a defenseman. Maybe it's Justin Hall, maybe it's Travis Dermott. I'm going with Dermott here, partly because I'd like to see him traded. I like Dermott a lot. He has a lot of upside, and I think he can be a top 4 defenseman. I just don't really know if he's going to get that opportunity in Toronto, so he's my trade candidate for them. The Vancouver Canucks are in a tough cap situation, and it's only going to get a lot tougher next offseason when they have to re-sign Pettersson and Hughes, who realistically could take up to $20 million in cap space between the two. Luckily, they do have a lot of money coming off the books next offseason, Tanner Pearson being one of those guys who's actually my pick here. We saw what happened with Tyler Toffoli. They lost him for nothing. A lot of people expected him to re-sign in Vancouver. Their cap situation just didn't really allow that to happen. I don't think the Canucks want the same thing to go down with Tanner Pearson, so I think there's a good chance we could see him traded before it even gets to that point. The Vegas Golden Knights, another team like Vancouver that is in a pretty interesting cap situation, don't really have a lot of flexibility there at all. For them, I was going back and forth between Riley Smith and Jonathan Marchessault. I decided to choose Riley Smith here just because Marchessault is locked up for longer and they'll probably get more value out of him long term. Also, trading a top 6 winger like Riley Smith would not only free up some cap space, it would allow Alex Tuch to now be a full-time top 6 winger. I think he's too good to be playing in the bottom 6, so Riley Smith is my trade candidate for the Vegas Golden Knights. The Washington Capitals, my pick for them is defenseman Nick Jensen. The only reason really being is because they have 8 defensemen capable of playing top 6 minutes. John Carlson, Orlov, Justin Schultz, who they signed, Brendan Dillon, Michael Kempney, Nick Jensen, Trevor Van Riemsdyk, and Jonas Siegenthaler. That's a lot of bodies back there. I think somebody has to go, and I feel like Nick Jensen will probably be the odd man out. And now the final team of the video, the Winnipeg Jets, and their trade candidate is of course none other than Patrick Laine, who's been in trade rumors throughout the entirety of the offseason. Whether you agree with it or not, at this point it is seeming like Laine will probably be on a new team next season. A lot of analysts have put a lot of stock into this and said there's no way Laine is still a Jet when this upcoming season starts. It's pretty crazy to think about. If you would have said this 2 years ago, you would have been called crazy, but that's kind of the reality of things in Winnipeg right now. Laine is definitely their trade candidate. That is going to wrap up today's video. That was one trade candidate from all 31 NHL teams. I know it was a longer video than you guys are used to, but if you want to see more like this, be sure to let me know down below in the comment section. Of course, if you did enjoy the video, please be sure to leave it a like. That is the best way to show your support. And as always, if you guys are new to the channel and you want to see more NHL content like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I will talk to you all in the next video.